Evening. I've timed the walk to the stage correctly, and I haven't fallen up the stairs, so I'm off to a good start. Yes, thank you for coming to my talk about smart home devices and data privacy. So let's get started. Who am I? I'm Jack. I'm a security consultant at WithSecure. We have an office here in Helsinki, just over there somewhere. I spend most of my day job doing web application assessments, cloud security assessments, and some mainframe. Mobile things are a bit of a hobby for me that I do in my free time, and I'm quite into data privacy, bit of a privacy nut, but I left my tinfoil hat at home today. So what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to have a chat about smart home devices and why I picked them for this talk. We're going to have a chat about which devices I picked. We're going to add some context a bit later on, and we're then going to go into what I actually did for this talk and what I looked into and what I learned. Why the data itself is valuable, maybe in ways you haven't thought of before. If we can reduce the data collection that are collected by the makers of different smart devices. And finally, what did I learn from doing all this? So let's crack on. So why smart/smart home devices? Well, mainly because everything these days is smart. Like a smart TV. You actually can't really buy a dumb TV, at least not without paying a premium. Or a fridge. That fridge in particular, which I think is an LG, has a camera in it. So if you're in the supermarket, you can check the contents of your fridge from the supermarket aisle, if you so wish. Smart washing machine, obviously, you can control your laundry cycle from outside your house and stop and start it and change the cycle and so on. And that last one is, it's not a Bugatti concept mock-up, it is actually a lawnmower. So yeah, that was an interesting note on the lawnmower, actually. It has all-wheel drive, apparently. I'm not sure why you need that on a lawnmower in the first place, but sure. And it also has its own, well, at least from the website description, it looked like quite a robust GPS tracker. And I assume the only reason that was put into the app that controls it is because they were worried that your neighbor might steal it and think it's one of these. So which devices did I pick? I picked a smart washing machine and a robot Hoover, a Roomba. Well, that's at least what I started with. And so during the build-up to this talk, I moved apartment. So the washing machine went to my mother-in-law, which is fine. I could still go and use it. But a bigger problem was that my Roomba died and never came back to life after changing the battery. So here is a memoriam slide for my Roomba. 4 years of long service, gone but not forgotten. We will miss you. So I guess you could say we're going from smartwash to smartwatch. I needed some devices that I could use in a hurry. So now we're back at the beginning. Who am I? No, I'm kidding. We are going to look at a Samsung Galaxy Watch 4, which was the cheapest smartwatch from Samsung I could buy in my local Elgingaten. I believe it's called Gigantti here in Finland. And a Garmin Forerunner 245 Music. So, because I had to change things up quickly, I was looking at the Android app for the Galaxy Watch, which actually doesn't come with an iOS app these days. That's not quite true. It does, it just doesn't work anymore, even though it's still in the App Store. All the reviews are just, this doesn't work, what's going on? And the Garmin Forerunner, which works with both Android and iOS. But let's start off with some context. So there are 180 million smartwatch devices that are expected to be shipped this year in 2024. 92% of people use them for health and fitness-related tracking, which is quite a common use. 42% of people have apparently discussed the data with their doctor at some point. These stats are quite US-centric, I believe, but those are the ones I could find that seemed thorough. So why did I pick smartwatches? Well, actually, it was this recent headline that caught my interest in the 23andMe breach, where people's genetic data was taken by some threat actors. And it got me thinking, because although, yes, I'm aware that smartwatch data, health data, is not the same as genetic data, it is still in the category of quite sensitive data, possibly. And of course, for genetic data, once you have given your fingerprint, or you use your face to unlock your phone or whatever, they're not things you can change. You can change your password easily enough. You can't really change your face or your fingerprints without a bit more difficulty. So what exactly happens when things go wrong? Well, a couple of years ago, back in 2018, there was a case of a group of servicemen and women, American, who were giving away the location of secret US Army bases because they were going for their runs with their smartwatches, and obviously it was being uploaded to their child profile. An Apple Watch provided some murder case clues in Australia, and actually also in Greece, the last one down there. There were some security flaws that were discovered in a specific Chinese brand of smart devices that were used for elderly patients, particularly with Alzheimer's, who you could kind of plot their location, you could remind them to take medication, just generally keep an eye on them from a distance. However, security searchers from Mannheim University discovered that you could actually give the notification and make it do things at will. So you could say, take a pill, or do an insulin injection multiple times as many as you want, which obviously if you have dementia or you're not, you don't have all your mental faculties, you might not remember that you've taken the first one, and so it could potentially lead to loss of life. The Ukraine war a while back, obviously there was a Russian ex-Navy commander who was shot dead while he was jogging. Because, again, his runs were being plotted through a very particular park on Strava, so he was very easy to locate. Or, if you'll Google, this was actually in their privacy policy. I didn't cover a Fitbit in this presentation, but I thought it was an interesting bit of information. They say that they will comply with government requests if they believe the reason is good enough, and therefore they will hand over any data they have on you, including what is collected by your smartwatch. So, methodology. What did I do? Well, I started off with the things that were easy to work with, which was privacy policies. I love a good privacy policy, me. I know that makes me a bit weird, but I do. I then had a look at each of the permissions and the app that the apps requested, so the functions that you can use as part of it. And then finally looked at any SDKs or third-party services to get an idea of where data might be shared. And then I also had a look inside. So I wanted to unpack and decompile the applications and have a look and see if there were some clues. I wanted to monitor the traffic with a web proxy and see where requests were going while I was using the apps and the watches. And finally, just to round things off, I wanted to capture some DNS traffic, again, to see which endpoints were being hit. So let's start with privacy policies, the boring legalese. This, oh wow, that's bright. This was kind of how I felt going into this, because it was really a bit of a maze. So with Samsung, you start off with their regular privacy policy there, which links to another privacy policy data framework, which links to another specific Bixby privacy policy, which we'll get into a bit later. That is a genuine link that Samsung uses to host one of their privacy policies. I'm not sure what's going on there. And Garmin's was actually quite straightforward. But rather than give you a big wall of text and screenshots, I have presented it instead like this. So, as we can see, there's quite a bit of data in common that both companies collect. So your name and your date of birth, obviously. Email address to sign up for the account. your location, payment information if you add a card to Samsung Pay or Garmin Pay, calls and message logs, and your calendar. For Samsung, specifically, they actually mention quite a lot about voice. So again, as I mentioned earlier, that Bixby is used on the Samsung smartwatches. They will ask you if you agree to the general terms and conditions, but what those general terms and conditions don't tell you specifically on the watch are that anything you do with it will be recorded by Samsung, including health. If you ask it a health-related question or something sensitive, it will also keep it. And the kicker is that if you say yes, and you happen to have other Samsung devices, so like a smart hub or a washing machine or whatever, and it happens to also have Bixby as a potential feature, it will also turn it on for all those other devices because they'll take that consent, or that one consent as a blanket consent for all. I thought that was quite funny because they had a very big thing about advertising and informed consent, but they wouldn't give you proper consent for this. It seems slightly backwards. For Garmin, they want access to photos. Apparently, it's a possibility to take photos and use it on like Garmin's social platform. I'm not sure why you would, but the option is there if you want. To record audio, save some body characteristics like height and weight, and also sleep data. And also, that other underneath. Well, it turns out that when I go and read a privacy policy, usually there is a section on data collection of children. And usually it's a very short paragraph saying, we will not knowingly collect data on children. Samsung actually really lean into it, and they say that they will collect all this on your child. That's not what this is about specifically, but I thought it was kind of odd that usually they didn't shy away from it. So maybe don't buy your child a Samsung smartwatch, is all I'm saying. But what about Garmin? Well, they do say that if they happen to collect information on the child, that you inform them as soon as possible, and they will get rid of it, which is pretty much par for the course with many companies. So permissions. What can we actually do, and what permissions do the apps request? So for all of you in the back, if you dig out your binoculars, no, I'm kidding. I've put a little chart together to kind of cover the common permissions as well. So all three apps will ask for your background location, your course location, which is within, say, 10 feet, your fine location, which is within, I think, anywhere between 1 and 3 feet. You're being able to call a phone, connect to Bluetooth devices, makes sense. Read your calendar, read your call log, your phone numbers, write your external storage. Samsung Wear can read your text messages, receive text messages, and send them. Write to your call log, and also write directly to device settings. You can change device settings directly. Garmin Connect can answer your phone calls, your camera, again, send SMS. Yeah. But what about SDKs and the third parties that might get some of your data? Well, this is actually a little easy to do on Android. There is a great website called Exodus Privacy. It is a French non-profit. You can go to the website and paste in a Google Play link or search for the app, and it will tell you how many trackers and permissions an app uses. So in the case of the Galaxy Rebel app, it actually has 0, which is quite surprising. But it does request 60 permissions. Garmin Connect has 4, Facebook, twice, Google for analytics and crash logs, and it also requests 52 permissions. Obviously, this is not a foolproof method, but it is a good way to kind of peek behind the curtain and see what's going on if you wanted to do that. For iOS, we actually only have a couple, which is the app measurement by Google, the Firebase Analytics like before, and also some Amazon S3 services. And I couldn't actually find a decent alternative to Exodus Privacy on iOS, so I used the built-in app privacy report, which you can find by going to the settings and then privacy, and scrolling all the way down to the bottom and clicking the app privacy report and turning it on. And then any apps you use from then on, it will start logging the most recent requests that it makes out. So, unpacking and decompiling the applications. Well, first off, why bother? Well, it's all good looking at the permissions and the the trackers that are in the app in general, but that only tells you about that app. It doesn't necessarily tell you about who else might be getting it, or at least it isn't necessarily a full picture. And by decompiling the app, we might actually get some clues. I've actually been lucky enough in the past, doing this a few times in my spare time, to find a file called partners.xml, and everything's nice and neatly grouped together. But what are we looking for, and how are we going to do it then? Well, we're going to use APK tool for Android and iOS free to dump for iOS. And we're going to have a look with some keywords such as SDK or partner or third party. And we're going to have a dig through the files and see if we find anything. And for Samsung Wear on Android, it says that we got 779 results in 317 files. I did have a quick skim through all these. Most of them are just obviously the specific mention of the thing you've searched for. Unfortunately, SDK is a very commonly used word. But the Android manifest XML file at least saves the day. So as you can see, we have Samsung, naturally. We also have, well, that's actually pretty much it. We also have some Microsoft love as well, which makes sense because they do say they use some Microsoft backend services and some app analytics. But for Garmin Connect on Android, we have Facebook a few times, we have Google, the usual suspects, so to speak. And for Apple, we actually have everything nice and neatly in the LS application query schema, which is, I had a look at the documentation, and it turns out this defines the URLs that you're able to open from within the app. So if you want to log in with Facebook or Google or so on. And for that, we have a lot of Facebook APIs, Strava, Garmin, naturally. It's pretty standard. So monitoring traffic with a web proxy. Let's dig in a bit further. What are we going to need in order to do that? So we have a few different things here. I actually really should have put these in order so I could do it in a circle, but I didn't. So I'll just go from one thing to the other. So first off, we need our web proxy. In my case, I use Burp Suite. You don't have to. You can use Zap Proxy or Fiddler or anything that's open source and free. We also need to have a Burp certificate so we can put it on our device and have it trusted by the device so that we can actually get in the middle and look at the traffic. And we also need the device to actually trust this certificate so it doesn't keep popping up with the warning saying this connection is not secure. In order to do this, we do need some jailbroken and some rooted devices. So we'll need Pale Rain for iOS, because I was using an iPhone 7, and also Magisk for Android, so we can root our Android phone. And lastly, we might need Frida, which is a way to kind of attach onto different methods and classes and overwrite behavior so that we can return things that we want. So once you've got all that set up correctly, you should be seeing some traffic. And we do. There's a few things in here, that's phone numbers and uploading things to different services. And if we take a look at one of them, we can even actually see the data. Amazing. So I uploaded a contact here. Obviously, that is not my phone number. I'm not going to dox myself. I just had to edit it manually afterwards because it wouldn't accept this phone number because there's some input validation. But it illustrates the point. So we are off to a good start. Great success. But what about Garmin? Well, we can have a look at some other things. Let's have a look at a file we uploaded, for instance, after recording activity. Can we read that? Not quite. It's a bit all over the place, really. But this isn't a Burp Suite or a web proxy problem. It's because of Garmin's specific file format. So we can use Fit File Explorer and upload our file, and we get the data we would like. In this case, this was from a run when I ran once upon a time, showing all the different statistics and things that are included in the file. So yeah, I moved on and had a look around at some more things, and this was kind of what I found. So if I manually adjusted my weight to be lighter than I am or heavier than I am, I could see that. Great. I also could do the same with height. If I wanted to take a stress reading, I couldn't see that happening. And then I thought, what happens if I do it the other way around? And if I upload an activity, obviously once you've uploaded it, the app will show you it in a nice little dashboard with statistics. Can I see that happening? No, I couldn't. But I could at least see equipment I added. So I added a bike with some random data, and that showed up. So yeah, it was really hit and miss, which sort of brought on this feeling. So what about the rest of the app? Well, we can still do something, even if we can't necessarily see the traffic as explicitly as we would like. We're going to have to make some assumptions while watching the traffic and like mapping what we do in the app to what is uploaded. So if we know what we did in the app, and we know which endpoint things were sent to, and we obviously know roughly what data was entered by us or recorded as part of the activity we did, we can make a reasonable guess. So to take a few examples, activity recorded went immediately to upload service, upload activity. So I think it's safe to say that anything we record, like a walk or a run or a swim, goes there. If we had a new weight, it goes to weight service, very aptly named. Or if we had equipment, it goes to gear service. So at least we can kind of get an idea of where things are going. So what about Samsung Wear? Well, it's actually absolutely not what I expected. And I didn't go into this with any particular notions or preconceptions. But it looks like, and I did this twice because I actually wasn't sure I'd done it right the first time. It looks like it uses or it makes some calls to Samsung's endpoints at first, but then it defaults to Android Wear Cloud Sync, which is Android Health's APIs. So what can we do to make this a bit clearer, considering it was all encrypted? Well, we can try and use Frida. We can make sure we've got the right app that we're trying to get a hold of by checking the PID. We, of course, want to turn off SSL pinning. May as well start with the basics and make sure we've got those right. And then we can poke around in something called JADX, which is a way to decompile an application, and we can start looking through the classes and methods. Specifically, I was interested in the classes that handled the encryption because I was hoping it would either spit out some keys or I could remove it entirely. And also had some help from the Android developer docs because it will tell you how to implement this in your app. So you can start narrowing down what exactly you're looking for. And then after that, we can try and get a hold of the particular method so we can get it to spit things out that we need to decrypt the traffic. And yes, repeat step 4 many, many times. And unfortunately, I was back to this feeling because it didn't work. So it's a good thing that we have some DNS logs that we can look at. So yes, let's have a look at some DNS traffic. Well, for Samsung Wear, we have Microsoft's Analytics, and we have some Samsung endpoints here, and then the rest is just Google services, which is very similar to what we saw just a minute ago. For Android, it's not much different. Sorry, for Garmin, it's not much different. We mostly have things going to Garmin-specific endpoints. We also have one thing blocked by Google there. I did this with NextDNS. You can do this with any custom DNS service you like a Pi-hole, for instance. And you can start toggling traffic on and off and blocking things if you don't want it to have connections made. So that begs the question. Is one mobile app particularly better than the other? To be honest, no, not really. They both collect roughly the same amount of data. And at least in my view, iOS seems kind of worse because the privacy card is quite vague and generic. It just splits it into 2 categories, which is data that's connected to you and data that's not connected to you. It doesn't give you more detail than that. Whereas obviously, if you went and read the actual app's privacy policy on their website, you would find it actually collects way more than you might get the impression of. Well, okay, for Samsung, obviously, it doesn't work even though it's still in the App Store, so that probably won't work. But any other app. So yeah, whichever way you cut it, there is a lot of data that is uploaded. But why is any of this data even valuable? Obviously, you've bought a smartwatch for a reason, and you want to use the functions. And is it more than just being able to advertise to you more accurately? Well, yes, let's take a bit of a real-life example and put this into some more context on why it might be valuable. So this is not a company I've made up. This is actually a UK insurance company, or not an insurance company, a UK health insurance provider who also does life insurance. And they will allow you to finance a smartwatch for £39 a month. But there is a catch. If you do many activities, if you lower your heart rate, if you get a certain amount of steps, they will reduce the cost of the Apple Watch, and they will give you points. And you can use these points to buy coffees, or pay for your Amazon Prime, or get free movie tickets. And I understand, obviously for them it makes perfect sense. They can, healthier customers means lower premiums. But they're not entirely doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, I would assume. They don't necessarily need to get all of this data. And at some point, I imagine things will start to shift. Not specifically necessarily with the Vitality, but in general, where it might be the case that you get a smartwatch and you use it for 10, 11, 12 months, and you get the statistics, and then they start looking at some of the data, because they do actually hook into Apple Health, so they do get the majority of the data. They might start thinking, well, you've actually looked to have a pre-existing condition, or you've gotten less healthy, so your premium's going up. Or worst case scenario, we actually can't insure you anymore. You're too much of a risk to us. I hope, God forbid, that never happens. But if I'm being really cynical about it, I wouldn't be surprised. But is there anything we can do about it to kind of curb some of this data collection? Well, prepare to be disappointed. I'm sorry to spoil the surprise here, but it is a bit middling. Like all things in life, it depends. So, could we go about blocking Garmin and Samsung endpoints? We could, but you'd probably cripple the app entirely, so it makes the smartwatch quite useless. So I probably wouldn't recommend doing that. Can we block some third parties, like Google or Facebook, for instance? Yeah, we can do that. We can use a custom DNS and cut that right off. And the app, okay, might complain at startup, but it should work perfectly fine. Can you use your smartwatch independently from the app? Do we even need the app and need it connected to a phone? Yes and no. So if you have a Garmin smartwatch, you actually can use any Garmin smartwatch without the app having ever set it up or connecting it to a phone. It will function entirely independently. Obviously, that does kill a lot of smart functionality, but you can obviously plug it in via USB cable and take the files and put them into something else. So you can do something with the data. If you buy a Samsung smartwatch, you'll have to buy a specific one. So the Samsung Galaxy Watch 4 that I bought, you cannot use without the app. It needs the app and to be connected to the phone to function. The only one that you can do that with and have it entirely separate is the Galaxy Watch 6, which is about €300. That kind of rubs me the wrong way, personally, because I feel like privacy should not be a pay-to-play, regardless of whether you either can afford it and you don't want to pay that much, or you can't afford it, so you won't buy it. Yeah. So the last one, can you actually self-host? Can we still have our smartwatch, but, keep, oh shit. Sorry. How did I manage that? Well, we're back. So, can you keep the data yours and make sure it goes nowhere else? Yes and no again. We can self-host. So you can either use a Garmin smartwatch with some open source apps from the F-Droid store, like OpenTrack, for instance. So you can at least analyze the data from the files and the activities that you take. Or if you want to go completely off-piste, you can actually go and buy an Amazfit. Amazfit? Amazfit? Amazfit. And there is actually a great project, open source project, called Gadget Bridge. So it completely replaces the back-end server of the watch, meaning you can have an entirely self-hosted smartwatch, and you can like manipulate and view the data in that, which I thought was quite cool. So what did I, and now you, learn from all this? Well, it's actually surprisingly difficult to be privacy conscious and have a smartwatch. And I know those things are quite an oxymoron because obviously you want the smartwatch to do smart things. You want to collect the data. You want to have the data that it collects. But it really comes down to the device selection. So if you buy a Samsung smartwatch that isn't a smartwatch 6, you're kind of stuck. If you buy other brands, you're also stuck. You have to go and buy a new device, which is kind of annoying. At least the Garmin can be used entirely independently. And the end result, even if you do start blocking some of this data that isn't specifically third parties, is you end up with kind of a dumb smartwatch, and then you've defeated the point. So really, I think it is about striking a balance. Mainly, do we need to have all this data recorded? I mean, for instance, on any smartwatch I've ever owned, I've never used the sleep tracking because I know I sleep terribly. And so it nagging me that I've slept terribly each day is going to make me more stressed and get less sleep as a result the next night. So I don't really bother. Read the privacy policies. There's a lot of things in there that companies have to be upfront about. You might be more surprised about what is actually being collected than you think. And finally, if any of this has piqued your interest, or you are also interested in privacy like me, one step at a time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Terrible joke, I know. But yeah, don't try and do it all at once. It's going to be a bit of a slog. And with that, it's Q&A time. And I am well under time, I think.